All right, can you hear me okay? This is when we go live and we have sound issues. All right, if you are watching, I know that you guys on Instagram, you can actually hear me. But if you can hear, all right, they can hear me now. Okay. All right, good. So that's why when you run off multiple mics, you can run into a lot of problems. So let me recap, guys. If you guys are joining me on YouTube and on Rumble and on Facebook, one of the things that I just said into nothingness is I'm going to talk about something I haven't talked about the immune system and about some policies when it comes to the COV, et cetera, how they've changed over the last couple of days and why it still doesn't make a lot of sense because I'm going to talk about the immune system. I'm going to talk about what science actually knew a long time ago and how we were really right 3 years ago. Why were we right? Because it just follows physiology. And I'll show you that it only begs the question: if you could be so wrong about policy, if you can be that off about policy, then the only thing that it means is that they're extremely ineptitude. They have a high level of ineptitude, or they have a high level of corruption. It has to be one or the other. Don't let them say we didn't know, because my goodness, let me say this: when people say you're just a chiropractor, I say, oh my God, I know. Like, that's how easy it is. If I could be right, gosh, maybe even a second grader could be right, or that's what a lot of people think. So, guys, make sure as we get into this is going to be really interesting. And yes, it will be a rant. I like to space my rants out evenly, only because nobody likes someone ranting literally all the time. So we try to give you a lot of good content, a lot of good information. Make sure that you see our next live coming up on Monday evening at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time, because I'm going to talk about part 3 of allergies. If you haven't seen part 1 and 2, make sure that you go back and watch that. Please make sure. And make sure you follow us, guys, on Rumble, on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok. We're always giving a lot of content, a lot of short videos, a lot of long format videos are going to be on YouTube and on Rumble as well. Okay. So interesting is that before I talk about the new policy that comes out of the White House, people will ask me, because I said, hey, got my blood work done. Got my actually IgG food allergies done. This is the 5th time that I've actually have done that. And then also got a mail panel done. People said, hey, I want to see what some of your markers are. And it's like, okay, I'll show you some, because I measure testosterone and insulin, homocysteine, C-reactive protein, things like that. And I do have sometimes some elevated inflammatory markers when it comes to the immune system cells, and sometimes with CRP. And a lot of that has to do because I'm always getting blood work after I've like worked out really hard. So you will see a different immune profile with people who do heavy lifting, and things like that. So I take some of it with a grain of salt. However, I'll show you the interesting lab. And if you're watching on Facebook or on Rumble and YouTube, you can probably see this. Hopefully you can. But I actually looked at this because one of the things I like really, really helping people, especially men, is especially because if you look at blood sugar issues and things like that, blood sugar issues and type 2 diabetes. I mean, guys, heart disease is inflammatory. Autoimmune disease, inflammatory. Weight gain, inflammatory. And blood sugar issues are one of the things that contributes to that so much, especially when they say about probably 2/3 of our country, they actually do have elevations of insulin. They have elevated A1C, and they say when literally about 2/3 of our population is insulin resistant at this point. And this really has to, this could benefit everybody with some of the things that I actually do and teach. So I took my own. I always like to make sure that I'm congruent with what I do. I always tell people, if I tell you to do something, it already means I've probably already done it 10 times. And in fact, last week I fasted for 5 days. So 5 days, water, minerals only, no food, water, fasting, and minerals. And I even worked out during that time. I did my blood work. This was only about 2 days into fasting, but this is the most recent one that I did. And so I took my hemoglobin A1C, which is my 90-day blood sugar average. That's not going to be affected by fasting, by the way. And my hemoglobin A1C is 5.1. And then my insulin levels are at about 3.5. So you can see that both of those levels are just super, super low. And good. That's where we want those things to be at. The magic number we always say is below 5.4, because 5.4 and above, actually, research has shown that even though you're not even considered pre-diabetic with your hemoglobin A1C at 5.4, you do see some accelerated brain shrinkage at that point. That's why you see so many people with diabetes, who they would call diabetes brain and dementia and things like that. It is 100% blood sugar related. Don't let anyone tell you. Related, not the only thing, but it is a huge thing as far as generation of the brain. And that's why a lot of people who do have blood sugar issues also have diabetic neuropathy. The reason why is the brain doesn't become insulin resistant. It takes in all the sugar that it needs, and everything else becomes insulin resistant except your red blood cells, which is why they measure it on A1C, and then also your nervous system, which is why it's the first thing that starts to deteriorate when people do have long-term blood sugar issues, why I call diabetic neuropathy. But then people can't have normal A1C levels, but they still can have high insulin, which means they're building insulin resistance. So when you look at mine, my insulin levels are so low, so it doesn't take that much insulin in order to keep my hemoglobin, my blood sugars down to that point. So it's really cool, hugely insulin sensitive. And that is, this is a great test looking at that. Now, do I even eat sugar? Yes, I do. A lot of that I have to, just because of how I train, doing high intensity, short duration type things. So this actually does give me a little bit of, some starch or carbs freedom. And I don't have to be 100% carbohydrate free. That's the point. So yes, I do have rice sometimes. Yes, I do have beans sometimes. I do have those things, but a lot of it just has to do with doing high intensity, short duration exercise, building muscle mass, and things like that. So hey, you asked for it. There's my blood test results. So I want to go back to what we talked about COVID. I got about 10 minutes, so stick with me, please. But this came out May 1st, 2023, and the White House announced that they're going to end COV, et cetera, vaccine requirements for federal employees, contractors, international travelers, certain educators, and also Medicare certified facilities. Okay. Now, this was a huge point of contention. What was it? Maybe a year and a half ago, and they were saying, you must get it, you must get it, you must get it, or you're going to lose your job. A lot of people did lose their job. A lot of people, if you look at the legality of it, once the lawyers can catch up to this, are going to get a massive payday because of it, because it was unconstitutional. But they said, you know what, we can end it because the pandemic is over. I would actually contend this, guys, that the pandemic is over because no one tests for it. And so when you look at the testing and you look at how ridiculously inaccurate the testing was, because remember, the testing wasn't showing infection, it was showing the presence of nuclear material. And once you amplify it up to a certain amount, then you will always see it. And I'll give you actually a perfect example. When we do stool testing in our office, okay? So we do stool testing, and which looks at gastrointestinal system function, stomach, pancreas, gallbladder function. It's looking at the microbiome. It's looking at the barrier of the gastrointestinal system to see for inflammation, looking for the presence of parasites, which, by the way, not everybody has a parasite. A lot of people say the parasite never tested for it. And it's looking for presence of yeast, pathogenic bacteria, things like that. When they look at the stool test, they do PCR testing, which is why it actually takes about 3 weeks in order to get the sample back or get the report back. But they do, in fact, do PCR testing in order to look at the DNA of the certain bacteria that are present and sloughing off and present into the stool. But it also, they don't amplify it 40 times. And also, the presence of that does not mean that there is necessarily an infection that's going on. So there's a big difference between the PCR testing that they were doing to determine if you had COVID or not, and then the PCR testing, that company that we use, Genova Diagnostics, on the presence of certain bacterial profile or microbiome that's taking place within the colon. So they said the reason why that we can end this is because because so many people, in fact, have gotten the okay? So, the pandemic is basically over, okay? Interesting enough is that our current president, whatever you want to call him, He actually admitted that it was over a long time ago, but why did it take so long and for them to be able to relax all of these draconian mandates? Because they really weren't mandates, because legally there is nothing that you can say, and that if anybody lost their job, it is a violation of their constitutional freedoms. The reason why I was so opposed to it was, yes, because of constitutional freedoms, but I was even more opposed to it more than that was the fact that it just didn't make sense, and it also showed harm. And that's one of the very first videos that you'll see on the Rumble platform. It was deleted off of YouTube, and I showed the blood work that showed that it was that was harming people. And a lot of people also have started doing some of the testing and shown the exact same thing. I thought, hey, if this is truly beneficial, then let's look at the immune system, the full immune system: CD4, CD8, CD3, CD19, CD56. Let's leave what's happening to these cells that are actually responsible for viral infections and things like that. Let's look at your neutrophils. Let's just look at them pre, post, after 4 weeks, and let's just follow it along. And when I reported on it, uh, all hell broke loose on social media. Okay, so they ended it because they said that it's over. But the thing is the reason why statistically it is over is actually because we're really just not testing for it. And if you think about it, I actually never tested for it. None of my staff effort actually tested for it. And you know what? If you actually are honest with yourself, if you did follow this whole narrative, ask yourself, when's the last time that I did in fact test for it? Am I testing for it every single day like I was 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago? So I want to show you an interesting article. This comes out of Frontiers in Medicine. The journal article comes from March of 2022. So this was actually a whole entire over a year ago. And this was what was interesting is they did in fact look at people and did the similar blood work that we have always done over the last 3 years. And they looked at this blood work and they said, hey, we want to see the immune panel of people who had a really bad day when it came to COVID, like a severe case of COVID. And they were hospitalized for it. And then we'll compare it to people who had mild to moderate cases of COVID who were also hospitalized. And they did blood work and they followed up with them. And they said, is there a difference in their immune system profile? So here's what they found in people who had severe COVID-19, et cetera, et cetera. So severe. This is why when people think that if they get a virus, it's just like, who knows? It's random whether I'm going to die from it or not. We know that it's not. We know that two people exposed to the same virus, they can get the same virus. How can they have such two different responses if it is in fact the same virus? The reason why is it's not the virus, it's the host. Let me say that again. It's not the virus, it's the host. It's the host. It's the strength of the host. And they actually asked this question. This is what we've been saying for 3 years. So here's what it's called: hyperinflammatory state and low T1 adaptive immune system response. Remember, adaptive immune system is responsible for killing cells that are virally infected in severe and critical acute COVID-19 patients. Shoot, I said that. Time to get banned on YouTube. All right. Anyway, this doesn't matter. So they looked at 139 hospitalized patients with COV, et cetera, 19. 58 were mild to moderate, 81 were severe or critical, and 74 recovered patients were included in a prospective longitudinal study. All right. They took blood samples on admission to the hospital, and they looked at a expanded lymphocyte panel, which is what we actually do when we do immune system panels in our office. And then they looked at them 8 to 12 weeks after discharge. So after they were discharged, they drew their blood as well. Okay. So here is what they looked at. Okay. They looked at their ferritin levels, which means if you have gotten your ferritin levels and you see that your ferritin levels are elevated, it's actually a good sign that you have fatty liver. It's also a good sign that you are insulin resistant. It's a good sign that you are in a very inflamed state. They looked at, guys, you can grab your blood work, lymphocyte neutrophil ratio. So they're measuring the number of neutrophils, which are considered the little eaters. These are cleaning up tissue damage and bacteria. And then they looked at your lymphocytes. Okay. Then you have a subset of lymphocytes. which you have your CD19, CD56, CD8, CD4, CD3. CD3 is really CD4 plus CD8 together. And they looked at that and they said anyone who's got a ratio of neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio of over 3, meaning 3 times more lymphocyte or neutrophils than lymphocytes, which meaning they're low in lymphocytes. That was some of the main things. Now they looked at some other chemical mediators involved in the immune response, but this one, if we just go over these couple, it makes it just a little bit easier to be able to understand. So here is what they found. Their conclusion is in these people who had severe COV, et cetera, we saw that they had a hyperinflammatory state with significantly elevated neutrophil lymphocyte ratio, elevated ferritin, and then they saw a low T1 lymphocyte signature. Okay. So what do they mean by a low T1 signature? Is a low viral response. Okay. And one of the things that they measured is they saw that these people had lower absolute values of CD3, of CD4, which is like your helper T cells and your T regulator cells, your killer T cells, which handle tumor suppression and virals, which is your CD8 cells. Your CD19 lymphocytes are the one that are actually making antibodies. And then they also saw higher frequencies of an innate viral cell, which is known as your natural killer cells. Okay. And in fact, when you have low CD8, CD4, low CD19, typically these people also have an elevation of natural killer cells. And I think that was actually on the first blood work that I did as well. A low CD4, CD8 response and an elevated natural killer response. And this was actually after the first or the second booster. Okay. Which actually set that person up for being chronically immunosuppressed. So they see that what they found from doing this is we found a lower Treg cell frequencies were found in severe critical patients relative to mild, moderate, and recovered COVID-19 patients. And we saw a significant reduction in Th1, and we saw higher levels of Th2. So Th2 has more to do with people who have a lot of allergy, autoimmunity, and things like that. So basically, what did they say? Is they said when people had a really bad day with COV, et cetera, and a really bad day in the hospital, we saw that the signature of their immune system reflected of having a very low viral response, being able to kill off a virus. We saw that they also were very inflamed on certain things that involve the immune system, that are involved in allergy, that are involved in autoimmunity and things like that. And also, too, having a high Th2 can mean that you are very deficient in vitamin D. So when they were saying that zinc, when they're saying that vitamin D, and they were saying that these things can help you, they were 100% right, absolutely right. And there was a certain group of people that were going to be greatly impacted no matter what virus it was, whether it's the flu or whether it was COV, et cetera, any virus was going to actually harm them. So when they look at this and you see, all right, even looking at this small sample, they could have easily studied a larger sample in order to confirm or deny. It would have confirmed based on normal physiology. And they could have actually said, hey, you know what, guys? You know what? Is that it's not the virus, it's the host. And what we should do is we should start strengthening the host versus trying to literally use draconian measures and penalize everyone who is healthy. And I always say this is that you lift up the weak. You don't make everyone weak in order to placate to the weak. You take the weak and you make them strong like everybody else. And so, this again, this whole draconian measures, the whole, idea of mandatory, that was basically healthcare communism, where everybody gets a medal, but now it's more like everybody gets penalized as a result. And so this right here, this is true. This was known a year ago. Why on earth did it take a whole year in order for them to change the policy? And again, it comes down to this. It can only be two things. They're either extremely inept or extremely corrupt. It can be both, but it can't be, it has to be one and or the other. It just has to. And so that's why a lot of people are upset. They're confused. They throw up their hands and say, I'm just going to listen to the experts because it's too confusing. It's too hard for my mind to get wrapped around this. And so they just end up saying, they go to their leader and they say, just tell me what to do. I'm just so frustrated, because it's very hard to think and to start to use your own intellect and say, hey, you know what? This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. And to start to question things. And it is okay to question, but remember, a lot of people who did question, who started to question the narrative, they were gaslighted, they were shunned, they were vilified for questioning the narrative. And remember this: if you cannot question, if they don't want you to question the narrative, then question their intentions. Question their intentions. So, guys, it really is about health freedom, that we should be free to be healthy and to choose things that are going to make us healthy. And we shouldn't be penalized for being healthy. This last time that I checked, I haven't gotten a check back from the IRS because I spend my hard-earned money on, yes, supplements, gym memberships, healthy food, things like that. But I sure as heck do pay the same amount of money when it comes to going into my Medicare for people who aren't making the choices. So that'll probably ruffle some feathers, but it comes down to personal responsibility. And this just goes to show that even your immune system comes down to personal responsibility. But the reason why people don't know how to take care of their immune systems is because they haven't been taught, is that their doctor has not taught them how to take care of their health, how to take care of their immune systems, how to prevent type 2 diabetes. They just say, wait until you get it, and then we'll throw a medication at you. And they don't give the person the choice to choose between this path and this path. So guys, let me know what your thoughts are. Do you agree or do you disagree? And if you do disagree, let me know why you disagree. Just don't give me an emotional response. I don't care if people disagree, but let me know why. So guys, I have to take off. I have to pick up my son from soccer practice, but I want to spend some minutes with you guys. It's been a joy as always. Thank you very much, guys, for following. Thank you very much for your shares. And remember, coming up on, that's not April 27th, it's May 18th on a Thursday at 6:00 p.m. Inflammation Talk. So if you're watching, you're from the Chicagoland area, go to the top, register through Eventbrite for our next Inflammation Talk. And this is actually the start. This is where you start as far as understanding a different perspective on health and on how to restore your body versus just not manipulating it all the time. So guys, be well, be blessed. And I hope you guys have a fantastic evening. So we will talk to you guys very, very